Hi everybody, I'm Christie Ribary. I'm a life, business, and spiritual coach, and I just wanted to share a story with you that I remember today from my childhood that really ties into a lot of the feelings that so many of us are experiencing right now with the coronavirus. And if you're like many of the people that I'm coaching in my private practice, or again, people that are in my sphere of influence or my friends, you probably are feeling some financial fear. You're probably feeling just general anxiety about the status of the economy, of the virus, of your own family's well-being. There's a lot of unpredictable things happening in our world, as we know. And of course, there's that just ongoing fear and concern of like, what am I going to do with my kids on these days? How will I continue to keep them healthy and stable and sane and learning and so forth? All those things I just mentioned, again, go back to this story that I have from my childhood. So it's just, think of it as like a parable or a story where there was a lesson for me during that time. And I actually, when I went and revisited that memory, it brought to life, there's some lessons that I can take from that and apply to my life now with my children, with my family, and even with the clients that I serve. So the story is that when I was younger, I had two sisters. We were in first, third, and fifth grade. And my father got laid off from work. My mom, meanwhile, had been a stay-at-home mom the entirety of me growing up. And my parents both came from very poor families, so we were lower income for sure, middle class, lower income. And my dad at the time was a mechanic for waste management, so he fixed trash trucks. And he got laid off from work, and of course my parents were extremely concerned about how we would be able to live and afford things. And we were living in a fear-based mode initially. And my mom actually said to my dad, Jerry, you know, this is the time to do something wild, to dig that big adventure we've always talked about. And he was very, reticent to do that, of course, because he was practical. And not to say that my mom wasn't practical, but she wanted to take this risk and turn fear into adventure. And so they had one savings nest, if you will, security nest, and that was a small piece of real estate that they had purchased when they were first married. So they actually sold that piece of real estate. We bought a motorhome trailer and we traveled around the country for almost 7 months as a family in like a 32 square foot motorhome with the Wagoneer on the back, the Grand Wagoneer. We had one of those. So here we are, these children that are being taken out of school, and we hit the road. So we pack up our house, we get into this RV, and we go for it for 7 months. My dad's driving, we're towing the Wagoneer on back, and we traveled to state parks, we visited relatives. Now again, this was almost 40 years ago, so you can imagine that things were kind of a bit different as far as our ability to stay in contact with people. That's when you were still using dial-ups. Sorry millennials, I'm going to be dropping a whole bunch of words that are going to be scary to you, totally unknown. You'll have no idea what I'm talking about. But anyway, there was like dial-up phones, long distance. We had to use pay phones to let people know we were coming into town. There were no cell phones. We actually would communicate with people still through snail mail, like saying, hey, we're going to be maybe arriving in your town between these dates. And even when we were going to state parks, we changed the way that we were going to be learning. So we had some, kind of homeschool materials, but my mom really took the lead in helping educate us girls, of course, being in first, third, and fifth grade, and really courageously stepped into a new sort of modus operandi for how we would learn. So again, similar to what people are feeling right now with the fear of finances, we were going through that, and my parents took a big leap of faith and said, we're going to do this. It's scary. It's probably a little crazy, but we're going to turn this fear into adventure and hope the universe is going to catch us when we come back and we'll figure it out. So we had trust in a higher purpose, a higher power. The second thing is, again, taking that fear, turning into adventure, and creating a new modus operandi for how we're learning, which all of you parents that are probably watching this are feeling that, like your kids are going to be learning in a different way, whether being guided from school and they're looking at their Chromebooks, or if they are younger like my children, where there is no curriculum that's being passed on, that I need to continue to educate and nurture their beautiful growing minds. So my parents at that time, my mom in particular, really changed the way that we were learning, and we really turned it into like an outdoor learning laboratory, if you will. So when we weren't in the motorhome traveling from place to place, we were outside, we were using nature as our playground and as our learning lab. And so we had to refer on a couple of different things, our sights and senses, of course, going on exploratory walks and seeing what the environment around us was. So we would do our reading through, here's another one, millennials, encyclopedias. Those were like the only things that we got to bring with us on our trip, was like our clothes and literally the encyclopedias. And that's how we learned about places that we were going to be going, or things that we were picking up, from the earth. We would refer to the encyclopedia and or mail off for pamphlets at the state parks that we were going to be visiting. So we'd have to like mail to them a letter saying, we're coming. Would you please send us the brochure on your state park? And we would learn about it before we would get there. And then we would go out exploring the physical environment to see if we could find those leaves that we were learning about and collect them and bring them back and curate those collection of leaves or rocks or different soils. So those are the things. This is my daughter Zoe. She's home with me, just woke up from a little nap. So those are the things that we did differently. So we turned fear into adventure in our family. Even though, let's be honest, it was very scary for my parents. We had no other financial resources. And as you could probably surmise, we didn't have a lot of money coming into the household. We lived lived very much on a budget, and we had lots of struggles. We had lots and lots of struggles. Even during that time on the trip, we were living, like I said, in a 32 square foot place, and we had to do everything differently. Like, my sisters became my playmates, my best friends, my everything. It was my only source of communication for 7 months. So if you're worried about your children being isolated with just their siblings for a 4 or 5 week period, they can do it. This is going to actually be really good for them. It's going to be really good for you. As far as the learning, we turned our learning environment into a creative outdoor playground where we could explore and adventure and learn and grow our minds in that capacity. As far as the unpredictability, our environment was changing every single day. We had lots of different things happen, lots of different problems with the motorhome, breakdowns. That would cost money. That was scary to my parents. Lots of different things that were scary and frightening. But again, we turned that uncertainty into a time of joy and adventure in our family life. The last thing I would say is that in this time that I've learned from my parents and how they handled that particular situation is that, again, they went from fear to turning into an adventure. And in a season where we really had so much less resources, less connection with community and friends, less money, less space physically, we had so much more. We had so much more as a family, and that was probably some of the best moments of my growing up, is this season of, like, we didn't have a lot, but we had each other, and we changed the script on how we were gonna live our life. And like I said, didn't have a lot of money, definitely didn't have a lot of personal space, but we learned, we grew, and we adventured and we played. And again, I know that's different than the fears that are overlying our lives right now with the coronavirus, but for those of you that are in quarantine, you've got your kids around you, you're wondering how to make the most of it, become an explorer. Teach your kids how to be an adventurer. Turn the fear that you have into adventure somehow. Get outside, go out and play. We'll see you another day, and maybe the story was helpful, but I just thought it was fun to share. It meant something to me where I'm like, oh yeah, my parents were pioneers once when they were scared where we're gonna get enough money to pay for groceries next week, but how we took a chance. Okay, talk to you then. Bye-bye.